We're following breaking news here, a shooting in Philadelphia, and right now, as we've understood, at least one officer fired shots at a gunman. According to a law enforcement official, there were two victims who were rushed by police to a hospital there in Philly with gunshot wounds. One is actually considered a possible suspect. This happened near a celebration marking the end of Ramadan Eid. However, police currently do not believe that it was connected to that celebration.
Well, let's bring in CNN Chief Law Enforcement Analyst John Miller. John, when you hear that there's a shooting near a celebration like this, given the political climate, given some of the Islamophobic attacks that we've witnessed across the country, your mind goes a certain place, but you are hearing from officials that this was more akin to a separate group of people that had a confrontation and ultimately opened fire, and that impacted the crowd.
Well, that's right. And the shots broke out at 2:26 p.m. at 47th and Girard, just about a block out from Clara Muhammad Square, where the mosque is. This is the place where you've got 10,000 people in the streets. The celebration at the end of Ramadan at Eid, they do this every year in the square. It's a popular event in the neighborhood, but also particularly with Philadelphia's Muslim community in that neighborhood. When the shots broke out, police were already on the scene because of managing the crowds in the event. At least one police officer reportedly discharged his firearm at one of the shooters. This is possibly two groups of individuals on the street shooting at each other when this started. Of course, that started the crowd running. The staging area was set up a block away while they tried to sort through what they have. So far, what they have is one individual who was wounded, who is in custody at the hospital. Another individual that was transported by police from the scene. And then the hospital, Penn Presbyterian Hospital, reports to police that three other individuals walked in with gunshot wounds, apparently self-transported to the hospital by private conveyance. So it appears, and we've got to underline, we're still very early in this. The information is preliminary. We'll be hearing more from police shortly. But it appears that there was a gun battle between two groups of people, possibly, that 5 people are wounded, that police fired at least one officer fired back at the shooter, and that they are now in the midst of trying to sort out who these people were, what the shooting was about. But I think it's important to underline what we don't think right now. Based on my conversations with law enforcement officials in Philadelphia, with federal officials who are tracking this, it does not appear to be an act of terrorism. It appears to be criminal activity in the neighborhood. It does not appear to be connected with the mosque or particularly to the Ramadan event, just part of some dispute between two groups in a neighborhood that has struggled with crime and guns.
Yeah, and yet here it is shattering this celebration of so many people, this popular gathering, as you said, John, what should be an occasion to mark. And can you just put this incident into context of the kind of gun violence and incidents that you have seen in Philadelphia and the region?
Well, Philadelphia is a city, like many American cities, but one that is in a particular struggle with gun violence. It is a police department that is making gun arrests and doing stops on a regular basis. There is the controversy of a district attorney who has been very progressive and has shown a hesitancy to go forward with criminal charges at the rate that police would probably like them to. So it's in a city that is in a struggle with violent crime. In this case, when the shots were fired in the midst of a crowd and the police put in 3 separate calls for backup and assistance, and then other people on the scene using their phones called in reports of shots fired, this was translated into an active shooter event, by the Philadelphia police's response. Rescue task force was sent by the fire department with bulletproof vests to render aid. They alerted the rapid response team and the emergency response team, ERT and RIT, to respond with all their units to the area. And it was a while before they were able to get kind of a lasso around this information to determine it wasn't an active shooter, probably not an act of terrorism, more likely connected to criminal activity between possible gang members or rival groups.
John Miller, please keep us posted on what you are hearing from law enforcement. Thank you so much for the update. Let's bring in CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe. Andy, thanks so much for being with us. Your general response initially to what we're hearing from John in the reporting about what unfolded in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Boris, I think tragically, these are the sort of situations that we can expect to experience and hear about probably more often as carrying weapons becomes more and more ubiquitous in this country. We struggle under a massive deluge of firearms. We have 120 firearms for every 100 people in this country. So this is in large outdoor events where you have crowds that essentially walk up to the event. There isn't a controlled entrance where people are subjected to magnetometers and things of that nature. You are going to run the risk of having individuals in that crowd who are carrying firearms. And when disputes and frustrations or arguments or fights break out between some of those people who are carrying guns, we now have a significant risk that those moments of frustration and anger turn to gunfire. So it's really a very logical progression as we go down this path of becoming more and more heavily armed. This is something we saw back in the summers of 2015 and 2016 with extremely elevated violent crime rates in places like Chicago and other major cities around the country. A lot of what we were seeing were interactions between opposing groups, gangs, any sort of criminal groups that in the years past would have culminated in fist fights and things like that. Now really all finish with exchanging gunfire. So this is something that police and city officials need to think about as they schedule and plan for these large outdoor events. But honestly, from what we heard from John Miller just now, it doesn't sound like the police could have done anything differently. They were already on the scene working crowd control at this pre-planned celebration of the end of Ramadan. And it's just another instance of one of these things turning violent very suddenly.
Yeah, you can see there in the square blankets that people have just left as they may have fled this celebration. Andy, if you can stand by for us, we did just get sound in from one of the witnesses to this. Let's listen to it.
We were just having a celebration for the Eid, something we do every year. We fast for 30 days and then at the end we have a celebration. We were enjoying ourselves. The kids was running around, everyone was eating, and at about 2:30 we just heard shots and everyone just started running and scattering around, and you hear babies crying, people on the ground. It's crazy. It was crazy. And then about a couple seconds later it was like another round of shots going off, and we were just running, and one of my family members got shot in the stomach. That's why we're here, to figure out what's going on.
So from what she's saying, maybe not related to the celebration, but certainly very much affecting the people who were there celebrating the end of Ramadan.
Yeah, it sounds like one of her family members was apparently shot in the stomach. At least 2 victims rushed to the hospital with gunshot wounds. One of them potentially a suspect, as we heard from John Miller, his reporting indicating that several others voluntarily and at their own apparent convenience took themselves to get help. We're going to stay on top of this story in Philadelphia and bring you the very latest as we get it. Multiple people injured there in a shooting. Stay with CNN. We're back in just moments.